Hello and welcome back to the Aston Villa The Villa View discussion show. On today's show I've got my normal guest of Dan Bardell alongside me. Alongside that I've got two very special guests. I've got Jonny Gould of Talk Radio and also Howard Hodgson, who is part of the Aston Villa's Supporters Trust. So upcoming on today's show we're going to be discussing the official confirmation of Tony Shee as our new owner and the comments he's made in the press this week. We're going to look at Steve Hollis. He's left the club. What's his legacy after 6 months as being chairman? New board members, they're all subject to FL approval, but that's coming very soon. So what do they mean? What can they do for the club? The likes of Jamie Banfield and Christopher Sampson and Keith Winus. Tommy Elphick, he's rumoured to be close to his move to Aston Villa. So we're going to look at him and what he could do for us next season. Is he going to be the man that we need to get us back to the Premier League? And then we're putting your questions to the guests today so they can answer what you want to know. Just want to make a point that Jonny Gould is our roaming reporter today. So there is a few little issues maybe you may see where he does disappear for a slight second or not, a little bit of a disconnection, but it's perfectly fine because he is our roaming reporter and we're very thankful to have them all on our show today. So let's get started straight away then with Dr. Tony Shah. He's been appointed officially now by the FA. Everything's there and done and dusted, Dan. This is what we needed, and he's had some big statements this week, hasn't he? He said some big things.
I think, to be honest, he's probably just saying what he thinks the fans want to hear. So by aiming for the stars with saying the Champions League qualification or trying to win the Champions League and be like Real Madrid and Barcelona, I think he's a little naive maybe, but I think he probably is just trying to say what the fans want to hear, because the fans have been through a lot. They've been through some tough times, so he obviously wants to get them on side early. I mean, if he was going around saying maybe we can get in the playoffs this year and build from there, the fans would be saying he had no ambition. So maybe he should be somewhere in the middle with what he's saying, but I personally have no problem with his ambitions at all. There's nothing wrong with having ambition.
Do you agree with that, Howard? Do you think it's good to be so sort of like upfront? Because Leicester's owners said this when they came into the club. They said they wanted Champions League football, and they've got it now.
Yeah, but then didn't Blackburn's as well. But yeah, so look, I agree with what Dan said. You know, if he'd been cautious, people would have said, what a loser. The fact is, he's ambitious, and he hasn't put a ceiling on his ambition, and that's refreshing because it means that he respects the size of the football club and the potential of the football club. And let's not forget, we did win the European Cup once upon a time, so we've proved we can do it. Obviously, Leicester's exploits as well. So yeah, set the ceiling high, go for the top. Obviously, the reality is that football in the closed season is a much easier game. You're not playing games, and we all sort of start dreaming again and forget that we only won 3 games last season out of 38. So there's a huge job to do here. This club has been losing consistently for a number of years. So it's great to aim high, but the reality is there's a hell of a lot of work to do just to get out of the Championship.
Jonny, bringing you in on that, he said he's been all ambitious about this, but then the one point that stood out for me at the whole sort of like interviews being given is the fact that he said he doesn't want to end up like Leeds United or any other side that's gone down into the Championship and gone into the abyss. Is that a promising sign, would you say?
Yeah, at least he's done a bit of due diligence, a bit of homework. I think he would do a lot worse than to study the arrival of Graham Taylor the last time we were in this pickle and see the remarkable work that he did at Aston Villa, and it really was truly remarkable. His appointment produced such a strength of nerve in the club. It produced such an upward mobility because of what he'd done at Watford. I mean, this was clearly a football manager in his late 30s, early 40s. He was going one way. He was going to become the England manager. We have Roberto Di Matteo. We have Steve Clarke. This is a real cause for optimism.
But Dan, moving forwards, on from Tony Shah and all that as well, 35 million, is that enough? He's been quoted a few times as saying different figures, but 35 million, that's surely enough, isn't it, this summer?
It depends who goes. I don't think we're going to have the wholesale changes that we want, because I think we are going to be stuck with a few players who the fans aren't keen on. It's going to be difficult to shift everyone. 35 million, it should be enough in the Championship to an extent. I mean, we're not going to be spending mega bucks on one player. That's a fact. 35 million should be enough to get in the 4 or 5 Championship-ready players that we need, added with hopefully those that Di Matteo spoke to that stay, and some of the loan players coming back as well.
Tommy Elphic's rumoured to be that first signing. What do you know about him, and how much can he be an asset to us in the Championship?
Yeah, I think that's a sensible move. I think that will be Kevin Bond will have had something to do with that because he's got quite a lot of links at Bournemouth. And Elphic's a strong character. He's a leader. You know, we've all been saying we miss leaders in that dressing room. People with the right attitude. People that are going to, really go through brick rules for Aston Villa. This guy, that's how he's made. That's how he's made his living. He might not be the most talented player in the world, but he's got a hell of a fine attitude, great team ethic, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's made captain if he does come.
Jonny, is Tommy Elphick that man that can take us up to the Premier League, or do we need someone else in centre half with him at that sort of level of calibre of work ethic, or can somebody like Kieran Clark step up to the mark?
The whole thing about his arrival is he knows the division. I think he'd be a fantastic signing, and if that is a statement of the intent of us getting promoted, I'll drink to that, because Tommy Elphick is the sort of player that we need at Villa Park. And put it this way, this time last week when Randy Lerner was our chairman, we could have signed Michael Elphick, so I'm absolutely delighted.
We'll move on further. Johnny's just sort of touched on it there, the fact that Randy Lerner was here last week, and Randy Lerner appointed Steve Hollis. Now, Steve Hollis has reportedly left the club today, according to Pat Murphy from the BBC. So I think that's a huge loss, because I think over the past few months, past 6 months since he's been here, he's actually done a brilliant job, considering he's apparently a man that knows nothing about football.
Well, not knowing anything about football, he's probably fitted in quite well with our board, to be fair, that we've had in place. He came in really, and he did the job that he was probably given. I mean, he asset stripped us to an extent, and he sold the club, so he's done the job that he was asked to do. He came in at a horrible time. Like, it was certainly not a good time to come in and be the chairman of Aston Villa Football Club, and he's done his best. I mean, his initial comment about customers didn't go down very well. I know I didn't take that very well myself, but I think that was probably harsh to judge him just on that one comment when he isn't a football man. And I think that was part of the problem, that we were thinking, oh no, here's another non-football man. He's done what was asked of him, and he will be a loss. But to be honest, there's no role for him there now, really, with what's happened and the takeover. So it's probably a good time for him to go.
Do you echo that, Howard?
Yeah, I have a bit of an exclusive for you. I spoke to him today. I've got to know him quite well in the last 6 months. And Steve is just the consummate professional. He's a mergers and acquisition specialist, a fantastic background in that. And he's done what Bank of America failed to do in the previous 18 months. He found us a buyer. And he's effected a takeover. That's exactly what he was brought in to do. Now, I'm not sure when King and Bernstein were there and Adrian Bevington, whether at some point they were thinking about not selling. But I think the main remit for Steve Hollis was to get a sick business into shape for takeover, and he's done it. He was never staying long term. He never wanted to stay long term. He doesn't like football, if you're being truthful, but he is a fine business organizer and, as I say, mergers and acquisition specialist. And the real test of whether he's done a great job for Villa or not will be how well this takeover pans out, because there were options and he's gone with this one. But we're all hopeful he's picked the right one, him and Lerner. And so he goes with all our blessings and job well done.
I was there with Howard the night that he said the word customers, and I completely forgive all his trespasses on that, because the guy was learning his brief. He learnt it at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and I think he did an absolutely brilliant job. And I think it's a shame that for whatever reason that he's not Tony Shah's man in the new money, that they can't accommodate a position for him, i.e. the top one.
Christopher Samuelson, Jamie Banfield. What do we know about these guys? There's a lot of people online that are sort of questioning about them, but I don't see nothing to question, because there's a lot of question marks over Christopher Samuelson and his background with Reading and everything that happened there. But on paper, he's actually done nothing ever that's illegal.
Whatever someone's done in the past, it is the past. So they they come into Villa now and they'll get a clean slate from me because they haven't done anything wrong Villa-wise for me to get upset about. So even if people have done stuff in the wrong in the past, people change, people learn from bad experiences and learn from difficult experiences or things they've done wrong. So hopefully these people are now in a place to do some good for Aston Villa.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add that, yeah, he's been accused of a few things, but he's never been found guilty of anything.
Yeah.
That's one thing. And second of all, do people need to ask themselves, have these people come here to fail? I don't think so. I mean, they have come here because they see a real opportunity and an opportunity to build a football club, get it while it's at a low ebb, and take it and build it and get it back to where it belongs. So I think people need to relax. I think people need to get behind the new owner and the board. And look, if in a year, 2 years' time, things haven't gone well, then that's the time to worry and complain. But now we need to support.
Yeah, I agree. And the standout point from the whole sort of like this new board setup is the point made by new CEO Keith Winers, where he said every club has heard a new chairman coming in and promising the world and delivering an atlas. That suggests to me he's got a lot of ambition behind him and he's got a lot to prove because he left Everton at a time where they were on the ear.
Yeah, I thought that was a great quote. I mean, I really liked it. It shows he's savvy and that he's going to be a real asset to Dr. Shearer, I think, because, you know, for all Shearer's business acumen and success in business, he's clearly a novice in football terms and in English Premiership terms. And this guy, you know, let's not forget, had a reasonable track record at Everton. You know, he mentioned it in the press conference yesterday. I believe he took the club over as CEO when they were in relegation trouble, and they ended up finishing fourth. So, you know, I think he's going to be a good CEO and someone that won't take prisoners lightly. Reading his Twitter feed.
Yeah, fingers crossed that is the case, isn't it, Dan?
Well, the good thing about him being CEO is that he seems to have a bit of business acumen, and he also seems to know quite a lot about football. So it's what we've not had with chief executives and under Lerner. We've not had the right appointment that knows football but can also do the stuff behind the scenes. I read earlier that he doubled Everton's turnover in his time there, which is impressive, and their Premier League finishes were very high. To me, it's an impressive appointment, and I hope he turns out to be as good for Villa as he seems to have been for Everton.
I've got to say, Tony Shah's inexperience is absolutely marvellous to behold. The fact that he thinks that we are not as famous as Madrid and Barcelona, and we want to be there in 5 years' time, sends a rocket to the heart of this 49-year-old who remembers when we beat Barcelona to win the European Super Cup, when Real Madrid were in the doldrums, a losing finalist in the year that we won the title. And then we, of course, went on to win the European Cup the following year. I'm sort of delusional about what Aston Villa is, but I am not delusional about what Aston Villa could be. And we have this massive opportunity if he can maintain that consistent investment and hire people, a bit like Hollis, who are proprietorial, who follow his instructions if he is that ambitious, or have their own brief and understand things and are clever enough that Aston Villa actually can do, not a Leicester City, but a Manchester City that can do, a Chelsea that can return to do an Arsenal. If Shah is as good as his word, and I mean, you know, he's talking a bit like a heavyweight boxer at the moment, why not? Let's get back to the big time where Aston Villa undoubtedly belongs.
Fingers crossed that is the case. So we're going to move on now to the Twitter questions. We've had 5 different questions come in, and I'm going to give you a question each to answer and just talk about and give your answer, obviously, in the perspective that these people have sent in these questions to us. So I'm going to start you off, Howard, with this one that's coming from Adam Pearson, who said that Roberto Di Matteo has contacted players he'd like to stay. Who do you think or hope these players are?
Well, you would hope it would be the likes of Jordan Ayew. It's hard to pick ones from a team that won 3 games out of 38 last season, but there are some good players still at Villa, like Jordan Ayew. I'd like to see Jordan Amavi stay. Obviously, let's hope he's fully recovered from his injury and gives us a season. There's not a lot there I'd want to keep. I mean, you know, I'm not a fan of Alan Hutton. I know he splits opinion, but I'm like Dan. I know Dan isn't either. I'm not a fan of Hutton. I'm not a fan of Micah Richards anymore. I mean, a year ago when we signed him, I thought, yeah, good signing, but as I think the football club did most of the fans, but that hasn't worked out at all. He's proven to be, by all accounts, very, very disruptive.
Moving on now to Dan. And somebody's come in and said, Mohamed Maya has said that which of last season's flops do you think should be given a chance? We've sort of covered that, really, with what Howard said. Dan, do you have anything extra to add on players you'd like to see given a chance?
Like Howard says, in an ideal world, you wouldn't give any of them a chance, but I don't think we're going to be living in an ideal world because people aren't going to come in and take, for example, Richards or Gabby. So I think we may be stuck with a few. And I've mentioned before, we're saying we need a new goalkeeper. If no one comes in for Guzan must be on 30, 40 grand a week. We won't be able to afford not to play him and bring in a keeper instead. So it's going to be difficult to move people on, and it's still going to be a difficult dressing room for Di Matteo to handle on day one, I think.
There's enough about the quality young players, and indeed the players who we sent out on loan to actually just change the dynamic of the dressing room a bit, and just to send a little message to the losers who are a bit older at Aston Villa that their days are numbered and they don't have to be our necessary first 11 pick. I just think that little bit of dynamism, just a few extra players back, maybe one or two signings, Tommy Elphick instead, really, really can be a tipping point, can change this Aston Villa side.
Somebody said the Lions underscore 1874 said, how quickly does Di Matteo need to get results, Johnny? Do you think that Zoll will be patient with him?
We do have to stick with our manager. And we've got a new regime with Steve Clarke. Steve Clarke also is not just a very highly rated assistant manager, he's got very, very good experience as a number one. He did very well at West Bromwich Albion. Jeremy Peace sacked him despite a top-half finish. This is a good guy who's been around at Chelsea, been around at Liverpool, managed with Jose Mourinho. He obviously knows Roberto Di Matteo actually as not just as a coach, but also as a player. They play together. I just think that this is a top-level appointment for the Championship. And if you think Rafa Benitez is a good appointment at Newcastle, take a look at Roberto Di Matteo. They're both Champions League winners. What Roberto Di Matteo did at Chelsea that year, after Andre Villas-Boas basically sent people like John Terry, Frank Lampard, and Didier Drogba packing, was pick them all because he knew they were winners in the dressing room, and uncovered an absolute miracle in winning the FA Cup and Champions League in his 4 months there that season. I like him, and I think we've got a chance. And I saw him score a cracking goal in the FA Cup final as well, but we won't talk about that.
I think we're all regretting that he ever did that, but I'm sure we'll be reminding him a few times of that if it doesn't go all too well during his time at Villa. This question is the final one, and I'm going to open it up to everyone. It's from AVFC_latest, who said, what needs to be done with the current scouting team? It's been rumoured that Paddy O'Reilly could be on his way out of the club. Is it the end of the current scouting team as we know it with this transfer committee, so to speak?
Oh, I mean, the committees, that's gone. I mean, Amstad went a long time ago, as you know. Fox, obviously, who put all that together, went a long time ago. I mean, we're going back much more to the old-fashioned model, if you like. Well, I don't want to label it old-fashioned because that may seem, I think it's out of date. No, what I'm saying is the manager's going to have a much bigger overall say in it, and working in line probably with his chief executive and doing deals as Doug Ellis and Steve Stride used to do with the Villa managers when they owned the club, or when Doug owned the club. So there'll be no committee as such. The only thing I'd say about Riley, and I'm not defending him, he put together a team with Sherwood and Amsterdam and all of them that just was totally inappropriate for the Premier League, has been proven. But we just talked about some of the players, and we said Jordan Ayew was a good player. There's obviously somewhat, he obviously picked, he probably went and scouted him and signed him. We think Jordan Amavi is a good player. So it wasn't so much the individual players that he signed, it was just the fact that he had no idea, it seems, to how to build a team, how to do team building, and and put together the right characters in the dressing room and get that mix right. And that's something that we've got to be very thoughtful of when we rebuild the team yet again. We must put together a team and not a group of individuals that don't get on.
100%, yeah. So the final question, I'm going to open it out to Twitter. The Twitter followers are going to answer this one. This is from Daniel Gandhi. Sorry we couldn't get around to this question, Daniel. But he said that Elphick looks to be signing, which other players need to be strengthening. Make sure you tweet into the VillaView _ what you think of those But for now, that is the end of the Villa View discussion show this week. Thank you to Howard for joining me today.
Cheers, Matt.
And of course, Jonny.
Thumbs up.
And then, of course, Dan Bardell.
Cheers.
So that is all for today's video. If you did enjoy this video, make sure you drop in us a like below and also subscribe into the channel. You've still got that amazing chance to win a pair of IT7 headphones. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. Also drop us a comment below on what you think. What did you think of this show today? What needs improving, maybe what doesn't? What did you enjoy about it? Let us know your opinions below. And also go over to our social media channels as usual to give us a cheeky follow. That's all for the Villa View today.